In our last lesson, we started looking at how to classify animals using our branching diagrams. Now, in this lesson, we're going to be looking at classifying our animals once again, but this time we're going to be using something called criteria. So this will be where we actually look at different features of these animals and try and sort them according to those. So in our last session, we focused on the Amazon rainforest, and what I want you to do now is to pause the video and I want you to jot down as many of those Amazon rainforest animals that you can remember. It doesn't matter what category they fall into, just try and get as many as you can remember from our branching diagram work in our last session. So pause our video and jot those down. Now, as there are so many different species of animals in the world, it's important to be able to sort them into groups. So now this is where we're going to try and remember some of those animals from our last session and be thinking about how we can actually group them into their different species. So can you think of any animals for each of these groups? They could be from the Amazon or they could be from somewhere else, a different habitat. So can you identify a mammal? Thinking about the different features that a mammal has, an amphibian, an insect, a reptile, a fish, and a bird. So now pause the video and have a look at the animals maybe that you've already written down and see whether you can match up any of those to the different species that you can see in front of you. So now we're going to play a little game and you're going to see whether you can match the different species of animal to the characteristics that I'm going to describe. So which group of animals does this describe? I'm a cold-blooded vertebrate. That's an animal with a backbone that has skin covered in scales. What type of animal am I? I'm a cold-blooded vertebrate, which means I have a backbone and I've got skin covered in scales. Am I a mammal? Am I amphibian? An insect? A reptile? A fish? Or a bird? Well done, the correct answer was a reptile. A reptile has a backbone and its skin is made up of scales. Do you know any other facts about reptiles? For question 2, which group of animals does this describe? I'm a vertebrate that has hair and breathes air through my lungs, and females produce milk to feed their young. So it's a vertebrate that has hair and breathes air through lungs, and the females produce milk to feed their young. Is it a mammal? Is it an amphibian, an insect, a reptile, a fish, or a bird? Which one are you going to choose for this question? Well done, it was indeed a mammal. The vertebrate means it's got its backbone. We know that they breathe air, so they are animals that need to be outside of water to take their oxygen in, and they are covered in some form of fur. Humans, not too much. Monkeys, as you can see on the screen, lots and lots. Are there any other mammals that you can think of? For question 3, which group of animals does this describe? A vertebrate that are covered with feathers. They also have wings. So a vertebrate, think about what that word means, that are covered in feathers and they also have wings. Is that a mammal, an amphibian, an insect, a reptile, a fish, or a bird? So make your decision and let's see how you get on with that. Well done, that was a bird. Now an extra question for you. Can all birds fly? So think very carefully about what we looked at in our last session. Can all birds fly? We know that a bird has wings, but do they all fly? Ponder that before we move on to our next question. For our next question, which group of animals does this describe? They spend half their time in water and half their time on land. They are cold-blooded and their skin is soft and moist but has no scales. Is it a mammal? Is it an amphibian? Is it an insect? Is it a reptile? Is it a fish? Or is it a bird? They spend half their time in water and half their time on land. They are cold-blooded and their skin is soft and moist but has no scales. Correct, it was an amphibian. And remember, some amphibians in the Amazon rainforest don't live in water. They live in the little pools that are created amongst tree roots or on leaves. So they can sometimes be that small that just a simple puddle will be enough water for them to survive in. Which group of animals does this describe? An invertebrate, one with no backbone, that have bodies consisting of 3 parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Is that a mammal, an amphibian, an insect, a reptile, a fish, or a bird? So we're looking for an invertebrate, something with no backbone, that has a body consisting of 3 parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Which group of animals do you think that describes? Excellent, it was an insect. Can you identify what type of insects you can see on the screen at the moment before we move on to our next slide? For our next question, which group of animals does this describe? It's a cold-blooded vertebrate. Remembering what that word means. Without limbs, so that's without arms and legs, who live entirely underwater. And these animals have fins and gills. Is it a mammal, an amphibian, an insect, a reptile, a fish, or a bird? So this is a cold-blooded vertebrate without limbs who lives entirely underwater, and they have fins and gills. Which group of animals does this describe? Excellent, it was a fish. And what do fish use their gills for? So now we've looked at the main species of animals, we're going to be thinking about different ways that we can organise them, because sorting animals into mammals, insects, reptiles, amphibians, fish and birds is just one of the ways that we can sort animals into groups. So I'm going to show you some more animals, and I want you to think about how you could organise them. And this next screenshot that you're going to see is a resource that's available online as well, so you can actually have a copy of that in front of you. And I want you to think about the different ways that you could organise these animals into different groups. So take a copy of this image of the 9 animals and place it in front of you, and I want you to think about different ways that you can sort them. So what sort of qualities can you spot which are similar between these animals, and what qualities can you spot which are going to be different? So we're not looking at the idea of being mammals or being amphibians. What we might be looking at is the idea of whether they have teeth or whether they have beaks, whether they have wings or whether they have legs, whether they have tails or no tails. So I want you to think about the different ways that you could sort these. So pause the video, have a look at the images, and think about how you would sort and classify these 9 creatures. So what ideas did you come up with? Would it work with every type of animal that I could give you? Have a look at the next 9 and think whether you could use those same criteria to sort and classify them, or whether different criteria come to mind, different features for similarities and differences can be used. So pause the video. Once again, you can download this image and have a little bit of think of how you could sort and classify these creatures, so these different species. So now we move on to our first activity. You can see in front of you we have our Carroll diagram, and this is split into 4 sections. And what we're going to be thinking about is the different headings that we can have for these 4 sections. So if we look and we have a look at our first 2 animals, what properties do these 2 animals have, which is the same as the 2 animals that are below them? Can you give yourself a title for that? When we look in our next column, we have 1 animal here, and then we have 3 animals that we can see down at the bottom. What quality do these 3 animals have, these sets of animals have, which are the same? And then when we look at rows, we'll be thinking about the same. So we can be seeing the 2 animals here and the 1 animal here. What do they have in common? Then the 2 animals at the bottom, along with these 3 animals here, what qualities do they have? And what that allows us to do is it allows us to give our Carroll diagram its headings to show how we've sorted them. So let's see how we've arranged these. So if we look at our first column, you can see that these are all reptiles. They are all cold-blooded animals with backbones who have skin covered in scales. When we look at our next column, you can see that these animals are not reptiles. So none of these are covered in scales with backbone and are cold-blooded. When we look at our top row, we can see that the snakes and the fish have no legs, whereas the crocodile and the lizard, the bird, the monkey and the cheetah all have legs. So you can see that we can categorize these, and if we had, for example, a parrot, we could work out which section it was going to be. If we had a scorpion, we could work out which section it needs to go in, and we can start sorting and classifying our different animals through those. So what I want you to do next is to take a look at this image, and this is one that you can download. I want you to think about what would the headings be for each one of these. So take this from the internet and download it, and I want you to pause the screen, decide what your headings are going to be before you replay the video and find out whether you're correct or not. Well done with that. So you can see with each cell of our Carroll diagram, we're giving it two headings. So for example, our creatures, our animals here, are invertebrates. They don't have backbones but do have wings. If we look down in our second section, we've got invertebrates, meaning they don't have backbones, but these ones do not have wings. And then if we look at this section, we've got vertebrates, things with backbones that do have wings. And here we've got vertebrates that don't have wings. So you can see that we can put different animals in here. So now I'm going to allow you to move on to your independent activity and think about those criteria. Think about what are the similarities, what are the differences, so that you can group and classify these different species of animals. So good luck with your independent work.